Year 5, Season 3, AR DPS comparison. Now, this is going to be part 1 of what is a 2-part series, simply because I'm going to be doing it in, like I said, 2 parts. And the reason for this is it is a hell of a lot of work, and I spent the better part of a week just doing this first part. So it's quite a bit, and I don't want to stretch it out into one 30-minute video when I can probably give it to you in just easier bite-sized chunks. So anyway, let's actually have a look at what this video is going to entail. The method, how I went about this. And it's actually pretty simple. It's essentially just spreadsheet simulator, as you can probably see in the background. I'm changing things on the fly here. All that I really do is I've made up one build. We're going to be using 3-piece Providence, the Gift, Sacrifice, and then a Providence holster, Contractor's Gloves, Fox's Prayer, Coyote's Mask. We're going to be estimating all of these at the short range buff. For each of these builds, I am putting them in 3 separate categories. I've got Exotic, 4 mod, and 3 mod. This way, all I need to change is the weapon base damage, as well as the RPM. For 3 mod, they all get calculated under the 3 mod section, because they only have 3 mods. These will give them, at maximum, 181 critical hit damage. Obviously, 25% of that is Coyotes. For the 4 mod, they'll get 186. Obviously, again, 25% of that is from Coyotes. And then for the exotics, because they have exotic attachments, it fluctuates a hell of a lot. So this is the one that's going to be the most heavily edited out of all of them. But the end result is I'm able to quickly go through each individual weapon on this build. And yeah, from here, all I'm doing is I'm calculating it from headshot. And the reason I'm doing it from headshot is quite simply, Bighorn exists. I would prefer to do it from body shot. It would be more accurate to you as the player. That being said, if I was to calculate it from body shot, Bighorn is not going to get an accurate representation whatso-frigging ever, and it ends up being an absolute nightmare. So it's all calculated from headshot, sadly. So it's not going to be completely accurate to what you play, especially if you are going to be looking more for body shots, but it should give you a rough idea of the ordering of where they're going to be in. The overall order isn't really going to change, but rather than it being like 15 million, it goes down to like 12 million, for example. From here, I've put them in a pretty decent standardized order, and for this video, we're only going to be looking at high-end builds. I will be covering strikers in a separate video, because some things do move around because of the crit. The structure, and what I mean by this is how it's going to be laid out, and this will actually become important and hopefully disperse some illusions about a certain weapon in the game, Capacitor. The reason I'm going to be doing it like this is because it ends up being more accurate over the performance of the game. So the way in which this is laid out is it's essentially in 2 parts, but each part has 3 subsections. First part is the high-end build versus armor. Under the versus armor part, it's no talents are active. So it's literally just base weapon damage. Your talents don't exist. And we're going to get 1 list. The next one is going to be ordered in burst DPS, same as the first one, but this is going to be with talents active. So this is going to be, if it's an exotic, it has its full exotic buff active at max, if it has a damage one. If they are a named, they have their named talent active at max, and if they're not a named, it's just a high-end weapon, I'm calculating it as strained. The next one is going to be calculated in sustained DPS. Again, all the talents are active, but again, this time, if the high ends do not have a talent active or on them, I'm calculating it as fast hands. Now, you will be able to see the sustained DPS for things like the weapon with strained, but they're not going to be in order. You'll have to read along. Then I'm going to basically do the exact same again, but versus health. So you're going to get the high-end build versus health with no talents, high-end build burst versus health with strained in their exotic talents in burst DPS, and then it's going to go again in sustained DPS with fast hands and all talents active. How to read the sheet. I'm just going to give some tips and tricks, hopefully limit the amount of repeat comments. At the end of each sheet, you're going to see this. The two red columns match. So the first red column is the DPS, the second red column is the percentage difference, the first blue column is the sustained DPS, and the second blue column is the percentage difference. I've had to do it like this because otherwise I can't sort them in order without the percentages going everywhere. I'm not good enough. The sheets will also be on screen for a fairly long time. I will do a talk through of the sheet, and then I will put up a nice pretty background, remove my ugly mug, and then put the sheet respective to the topic as large as I can on screen in case you wish to take a screenshot. Though please, if you do share them, please do add in some of the notes or the more important notes that I will be going through with talking about this. Preferably just share the video as much as you wish. Anyway, without further ado, let's actually have a look at some of these sheets. It's been nearly 6 minutes and I'm still talking about crap. So at first we have Highend versus Armour. The first sheet is going to be without talents active. You can see here. So this is 100% headshot accuracy. Feel free to take your own accuracy into account and just hopefully exercise a bit of caution when thinking, oh, Bighorn does the most DPS. Yeah, try using it. Up next, we have Capacitor, Invisible Hand, Eagle Bearer, F2000, AKM, FAMAS, St. Elmo's, PDR, Test Subject, AKM Military and Black Market, G36, FAL, P416, the AUG, TKB, ACR, MK16, Police M4, Honey Badger, CTAR, SIG 556, and then Chameleon. Now we have with talents active, so we get Bighorn, Chameleon, Capacitor, Test Subject, assuming 100% uptime on Perfect in Sync. The TKB with Perfect Flatline, Kingbreaker, I don't know why I didn't name it that. Invisible Hand, F2000, Eagle Bearer, AKM, FAMAS, PDR, AKM Military and Black Market, G36, FAL, P416, AUG, ACR, MK16, St. Elmo's, Police M4, Honey Badger, CTAR, Carbine 7, and then SIG 556. Now we have sustained DPS with fast hands. The talents are all active for named as well as exotics. Chameleon, Bighorn, F2000, PDR, AUG, AKM, MK16, Capacitor, AKM Military / Black Market, ACR Test Subject, FAMAS, TKB with Flatline, CTAR, G36, FAL, Honey Badger, P416, St. Elmo, Eagle Bearer, Carbine 7, Police M4, Invisible Hand, and then the SIG 556. Now we have Highend versus Health. Again, starting off with no talents. These are basically going to be in the same order. Really, nothing actually changes. Bighorn, Invisible Hand, Eagle Bearer, F2000, AKM, FAMAS, St. Elmo's Engine, PDR, Test Subject, AKM Military and Black Market, G36, FAL, P416, AUG, TKB, ACR, M16, Police M4, Honey Badger, CTAR, Carbine 7, SIG 556, Chameleon, and then finally Capacitor. That's right, if you put damage to targets out of cover on your Capacitor, it actually ends up being worse than Chameleon without any stacks. Enjoy that. It's now Highend versus Health with talents active. We have Bighorn, I'm shocked at this point. Chameleon, Test Subject, TKB, again, Perfect Flatline is active. It should just be called Kingbreaker, I'm an idiot. Invisible Hand, F2000, Eagle Bearer, AKM, FAMAS, PDR, AKM Military and Black Market, G36, FAL, P416, AUG, ACR, M16, St. Elmo's Engine, Police M4, Honey Badger, CTAR, Carbine 7, SIG 556, and then again, the meta. And finally on the list, we have sustained DPS, again using talents, and if they don't have a talent, we've got fast hands, Chameleon, Bighorn, F2000, PDR, AUG, AKM, M16, AKM Military and Black Market, ACR, Test Subject, TKB with Perfect Flatline, Kingbreaker, I'm an idiot, it's punishment at this point. FAMAS, CTAR, G36, FAL, SIG 556, Honey Badger, P416, St. Elmo's Engine, Eagle Bearer, Carmine 7, Police M4, Invisible Hand, and then finally, obviously, Capacitor, because, yeah, we've put DTA and DTOC on it because we're smart. Very smart. Now, firstly, thank you very much for making it this far into the video. It really is greatly appreciated, though if I could hold your attention for a few more minutes, I have 2 talking points that I'd like to go over with you. First of which is St. Elmo's. Now, some of you might be looking at this going, well, why is St. Elmo's so low on the list? The answer is quite simply, it's on a high-end build. I've been saying for ages, I said it since it came out, St. Elmo's does not fit into a high-end build. Quite simply, you either end up having to compromise your overall build to get it to fit, in which case you have a weaker build, or you end up wasting a substantial amount of critical hit chance. With the build that I showed, 3-piece Providence, Sacrifice, and the Gift, Contractors, Foxes, and Coyote's Mask, all of my mods were also turned to critical hit damage. I think it had like 188 critical hit damage before even factoring in Coyote's Mask. The problem is, where we're wasting essentially a full crit roll, essentially, the overall performance of other ARs very, very quickly overtakes it, because we're able to hit that exact 60 and then dump the rest into critical hit damage, which will easily outperform it, especially with weapons that have a faster RPM, including FAMAS and now the F2000. Even CTAR is able to keep up with the St. Elmo's engine. It's really not a good weapon to be using on a high-end build. On something like a Striker's build, a build that is quite crit-starved, where you're not readily available to get quite a lot of crit into it, that is where St. Elmo's really shines, not on a high-end build. Next talking point is Capacitor. Now, there is an unruly, and I do mean really unruly, amount of people claiming that Capacitor is the better AR. This quite literally couldn't be further from the truth. It would probably be more accurate to say that Capacitor is the worst AR. The reason for this is similar to the reason, well, it basically is the reason that I touched on during my video for LMGs, and it is quite simply that not every enemy in the game has armor, though every enemy has some form of health, including things like Chungers, who are just not affected by damage to armor at all. So putting damage to armor and targets out of cover on there, sure, on the range, against certain enemies, you might get big, hefty number, till that Chunger walks around the corner, or till you get swarmed by a bunch of reds, at which point it very heavily becomes the worst AR. On health, it is the worst AR. Now, it is still up for debate, let's put it this way, as to how much health is actually of value and how much value health actually has, if that made any sense. Though what I can tell you is health does have value at varying different levels. So having a weapon that is unable to sustain a similar or at least constant damage medium across both health and armor is the worst way to go. The worst way to go. Because you'll be doing like 1.4 million crits against armor, and then suddenly you hit health and your damage vanishes. Now, against like elites, purples, possibly won't really notice it. Against the Chunga, you absolutely will, especially if it's a named Chunga. To put it simply, realistically, from the testing that I've done so far, it's not complete, so do not hold any stock in this. But the only way in which Capacitor is able to be considered meta is if you do literally nothing other than countdown, because of the very, very large amount of non-scalable, tanky as hell elites and named elites. And on occasion you might get the occasional Chunga, but still, that's probably the only area, if there is an area, of where Capacitor could be considered meta. Just going to add in a tiny little conclusion here. I'm not sure if you were paying attention, but you might have noticed, if you were, that the only weapon that was really quite consistently at the top, other than things like Bighorn, but that are usable and quite accurate and fit into a variety of different builds without having to compromise your build. The only weapon that was really at the top throughout was the F2000. Good luck. Have fun. Don't die. It's bad for the health.